So this is called the
continuous glucose monitor.
Glucose monitor.
Continuous glucose monitor.
And you can use it to see how your body responds to the food you eat in real time. 90 days ago, I bought one of these, and I've been tracking my health, focus, and diet meticulously. And after wearing this, I found a few simple things that I can do to optimize my glucose levels for peak cognitive and physical performance. But it's a bit unrealistic to expect everyone to buy one of these continuous glucose monitors and track everything that they eat and how they feel. So here are the 5 key principles about how to optimize your focus and health without having to spend hundreds of dollars to buy one of these and test it out for yourself. The first thing I learned pretty quickly is to exercise around your meals. When I was in college, every day for lunch, I would go to Chipotle, which is this place that sells Mexican burrito bowls, and I would order the biggest burrito bowl you can imagine. Tortilla on the side, double steak, double rice, extra cheese and guac. This was during my bodybuilding phase in college, where I just wanted to get as many calories as possible. And every day after eating this for lunch, I would be in this huge food coma. Me and my roommate, we called it the Chipotle slump. It would take another few hours before I would really feel all good again and actually be able to do some work, but the cycle would just repeat again the next day. But one day I went for a run right before I had this big meal, and something incredible happened. I didn't feel that big crash afterwards. I was able to get right to work without having to wait a couple of hours to get back into that state of focus. And after wearing one of these continuous glucose monitors, I realized the reason. When I would have these big food comas, it was because my body was recovering from a huge glucose crash, and I would have to wait until my glucose levels stabilized again for me to feel back to normal. And the reason why exercise mitigated this crash is because glucose is essentially a form of energy. And in order to use that energy and prevent a crash, the best way is to do some exercise before or after a meal, or even both. Personally, I found that working out before a big meal to be the best because it's very rewarding. But studies have found that you don't even need such an intense workout to have the same benefit. Just 2 minutes of walking after a meal has been shown to dramatically reduce your blood sugar levels. This is a massive hack because if you make sure to have some sort of exercise around your meals, then you're actually using the food for energy versus the food taking you out of a state of flow. Just 2 minutes is enough for your body to change its response to food. The added benefit is that doing this regularly of exercising around your meals has been proven to increase insulin sensitivity. So that just means that in the future, your body would just have a naturally better response to reducing glucose spikes, even without doing exercise around your meals. All right, but the second lesson that I learned was not necessarily to change what I was eating, but to change the order of what I was eating. And that really starts with having a high protein meal for breakfast. Compared to having a high carbohydrate breakfast like fruit, bagel, bread, juice, or milk, when you just have protein, it does not create a glucose spike. And so you can use that to your advantage. There are studies now that show that if you just have protein early in the day, it can suppress glucose spikes for the rest of the day. I started doing this after reading about it in The 4-Hour Body, where the author Tim Ferriss talks about this morning routine where you have 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking. I also made a video about this in depth if you want to check that out. But I've definitely seen in using these trackers that it's improved my cognitive and physical performance. The added benefit for this one is that having protein also keeps you feeling full for longer. So it definitely helps you make better health decisions later in the day, like not having a sugar-filled drink or ordering something unhealthy if I'm eating out. And I've also tested within the same meal, if I have protein before I have carbs, that also minimized the glucose spikes overall. Yeah, for having a high protein breakfast, in my experience, the easiest way to do this consistently is just to have a protein shake. The one mistake that I made with this before is that my protein shake used to contain some sugars. So I used to blend some bananas in my protein shake. But in using this continuous glucose monitor, I saw that it was giving me a huge glucose spike that would take a couple of hours for it to stabilize again. So now I just completely eliminate carbs and sugar in the morning, and I just go for a plain protein shake. The third lesson is to avoid having heavy carbs until dinner time. So if you're like me, you probably experience that afternoon slump after lunch. And if you listen to the Huberman podcast, this could be caused by a number of things.
Now, some of you might be doing your main bout of exercise first thing in the morning, and you want your caffeine before that bout of exercise. You will find, however, that you're going to get an early afternoon dip in energy, and that dip in energy is going to be substantial because it's going to be a dip in energy that naturally follows that workout from the morning.
But I realized for me, it was really caused by having too much carbohydrates for lunch. While I was wearing the CGM for the past 90 days, I had one day where I was invited for lunch to go out and eat Korean barbecue. Usually, my experience with that is that I usually have this huge food coma afterwards where it's going to take me a couple of hours to recover. This time, because I was wearing a continuous glucose monitor, I wanted to test out my new hypothesis. I pretty much just avoided any food that had any type of sugars like sweet sauce or rice paper, and I only had protein. And by the end of the meal, even though I had a ton of food, I saw that I pretty much had zero glucose response during the meal and also afterwards. And this was even without exercising before or after the meal. So now I try to have a low carb or even a no carb lunch, since I usually still try to get some hours of focus afterwards, and I try to push that off until dinner. This shift was really powerful for me in mitigating the afternoon slump and not reaching for a second cup of tea or coffee. Apparently Andrew Huberman, he does this too. He says that for lunch, he usually just eats meat and veggies, and for dinner, that's when he'll have his starchy carbohydrates like pasta. He said that by doing this eating pattern, it's improved his sleep quality and also replenished his glycogen storage source for the next day because he usually works out in the morning. And I've definitely experienced similar benefits by doing this. One thing I realized with having a high carbohydrate dinner is that depending on the time that I ate it, it could negatively impact my sleep quality, which would just affect my focus and mood for the next day. And so the fourth lesson that I learned is to have dinner as early as possible. Ideally, you want to be in a fasted state before you go to bed and while you are asleep, because this is when your glucose levels are the most stable, and that means you'll have the highest quality of sleep. And you probably already know that having a good quality of sleep is extremely important for your focus and mood for the next day. During these 90 days, along with tracking my glucose levels with my CGM, I've also been tracking my sleep quality with my Oura Ring and also my Whoop. I found that if I ever woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't fall back asleep, it was usually linked to a glucose spike at the exact same time. And this would usually be caused by having some sort of like high carbohydrate snack near bedtime or just having dinner too close to bedtime. The further that I pushed my last meal for my bedtime, the higher quality of sleep that I would get. If you see my video talking about the biohacker Brian Johnson, he pretty much eats dinner at 12 p.m. and that's really to optimize for his sleep and glucose level. But I don't think you have to go that extreme at all. For me, I found that 5 to 6 p.m. to be a good time to have dinner if I'm trying to go to bed by 9 or 10 p.m. That way, by the time I go to bed, I'm in a fasted state, and that just makes it easier to have more amounts of deep sleep. Having that high quality of sleep really makes everything the next day easier, like more focus and better willpower to make better health decisions. That leads me to the fifth major lesson I learned with wearing one of these, and that's to choose foods with a lower glycemic index. If you've never heard of the glycemic index, it's basically a speedometer for foods with carbohydrates. The higher the number, the faster your body can absorb it into the bloodstream, which means you'll have a higher glucose spike. So in short, a smaller number is healthier than a larger number. You can pretty much search up any food with carbohydrate and see the glycemic index. White rice, for example, is 72. Basmati rice is around 55, 50 to 58. Broccoli is 10, and watermelon is 72. Everyone will have a slightly different response to the same foods, but just searching up the glycemic index of foods that you eat on a regular basis can help you make way better health decisions. If you want to take it to the next level, you can be like me and buy one of these CGMs and test it out for 30 or 90 days, because that way you can actually test your body's specific response to the foods that you eat on a regular basis. I found some pretty interesting things, like if I refrigerate white rice, it tends to lower the glucose response that I have, or how I'm pretty much no longer allowed to eat my favorite local sandwich because it just gives me this insane glucose spike that lasts a couple of hours no matter what I do. The brand of CGM that I use is called Levels. Ask the company for a discount code, which you can use at levels.link/Reisu if you want to try it out for yourself, but I would definitely recommend trying it out if you want to optimize your diet and routine further. But in summary, here are the points again. Number 1, exercise before or after your meals. Number 2, have a high protein breakfast. Number 3, avoid having heavy carbs until dinner time. Number 4, have dinner as early as possible. And number 5, choose foods with lower glycemic indexes. These are super simple things that you can do that will have huge ROIs on your health, focus, and longevity. I'll see you in the next video. Peace. Thanks for watching to the end. If you want to see another video next week, make sure to either subscribe or hit the like button so the algorithm shows it to you again. But I'll see you again